And then we have these moments where there's soft moments like we're in now. And then in the soft moments, a lot of people don't create the inventory that is created in the sort of the busy moments. And then we are in a bad situation down the road. And it's hard to imagine that we won't be in that.
Welcome to The Flow, Real Estate and Money Show, a show focused on helping Canadians understand the different elements of real estate, mortgage, and finance. The goal of our show is to provide Canadians with the tools, information, and knowledge to have more success when it comes to their investing and real estate related decisions going forward. My name is Alex McFadyen, and I'm your host. I can't wait to get you into the flow. All right, welcome back, Mr. Adam Scalena, who doesn't probably need any introductions because it's officially your third time back on the show. Appreciate you, man. Thanks for carving out some time in your calendar. I know you're a busy guy.
Thank you for having me, Alex. Yeah, I'm a big fan.
Whoa. All right. We'll start off with that. Are you a fan of the show or the mustache?
The show, both. Is this a Movember or is that's got to be? I've never seen you with a mustache before.
Well, it's where it started. And then, I look at myself every day and I'm like, I don't know if I can let this thing go. It's,
that's pretty great.
I'm attracted to myself these days. What can I say? Glad you made a time to come back. We had a conversation at the start of this year and a lot of people tuned in, and it was not necessarily like a prediction show, but in some ways it was. We were talking about where Vancouver real estate could go and where it is right now, or at least where it was at the time. And you came up with a series of different, I don't know if we call them predictions, but projections based on some conversations that you had on your own podcast, the Vancouver Real Estate Podcast. Plug there for you. And these were pretty good. There were a lot of good projections and predictions that you had in place. We just were covering those and just going through those before the show right here. Some of them a little bit, off, but most of them were pretty damn close. So I feel like anybody who wants to know what's going on in the marketplace probably just needs to listen to you for the most part. But on top of that, we've got a lot of things happening right now, like a lot. So it was like, how do we pick from the 50 different things that have happened in the last 3 months and just narrow them down? So before I let you actually speak, which I know we gotta let you do here, if you're listening to the episode, you're going to want to listen to the very end because Adam's got some really good stuff that he's chatted with a few guests on lately as it relates to upcoming pre-sales, the market for 25, and then obviously what the heck is going on with the rental market right now. But let's get into it. Welcome back, Adam. Welcome back. How do you feel 9 months later?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was definitely wrong on a few of these. I think it's been a surprising year. I would have said a year ago that we would be in a busier spot than we are now. And I think that's probably where I think I got it wrong was the reaction to the interest rates. In hindsight, I think the error in the logic of thinking that once rates come down immediately, that the market, there's going to be an uptick is, when rates started going up, we didn't see the market shut down, right? There's always a lag period. And I think I underestimated the lag period for activity around rates. So there hasn't been as much buyer demand as I would have anticipated this year.
Yeah, well, to your credit, based on the conversation that we had, for anyone who didn't listen to this episode, and by the way, it's linked in the show notes here, when we spoke, we also had an understanding that rates were possibly going to come down earlier in the spring than they actually did. The BOC didn't start cutting at least variable rates until July. And the vast majority of people who aren't following this day to day don't really or look at the difference between fixed and variable. So although fixed rates were come down pretty early in the spring, they came down in February and March pretty quickly. Most people are actually just paying attention to what the national media talks about, and the national media primarily focuses on the BOC. So you're right on the lag effect, but I would say we're going to give you definitely a little bit of credit on that point because even though it took some time, here we are November, we'll date this November of 2024, and we are actually starting to see that lag take effect just a little bit later than it was expected, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've got, I think home sales in October were about up 30% or so over last October. I think that's one thing. So there's definitely, depending on where you're looking at the activity. I mean, people always have to look at the submarkets, I think, because in certain submarkets I'm looking at, like we're firmly planted in a seller's market again, like Kitsilano, for example, like looking for a condo or a townhouse in Kitsilano, it's quite busy. However, there are still kind of lagging markets, specifically, parts of downtown, for example, in the Vancouver market, and of course, all over the region, kind of depending on what the product type is, and of course, which submarket you're looking at.
Well, one of the things you talked about in that episode, you talked about how Vancouver is a pretty resilient market, both from a buyer standpoint and from an investor standpoint. You said, with Vancouver being a relatively stable economy and a desirable location, these price points are likely to hold regardless of what happened in the marketplace. And I would say, I mean, I'm not looking at the price points of Vancouver market all day, every single day, but I feel like that was overall true in most of Vancouver, even despite this supply hike in certain areas. We never really saw the market tip the scales and really see Vancouver as a whole dip dramatically in prices. Like, was that your experience?
Yeah, I mean, and again, it's hard to talk in generalizations, but certain markets, no, there's a lot of stickiness in the pricing, and I think this has to do, we've talked on our program, and we talk a lot around the office of Brian Yu's concept of like as a self-selecting housing market, and in short, this idea is basically that you have a lot of people. The barrier of entry in the city of Vancouver is so high that you have a lot of people that are living here that are very wealthy that can withstand downturns in the market. So what you see people do is instead of there's very few fire sales, right? And so that's kind of the idea, is that it's created by this. There's this market resilience that keeps prices buoyant or sticky in downturns. And I think we've seen that throughout the past 18 months in our market. We've seen it, well, even for a longer stretch, but specifically this year, where a lot of stuff was not turning over. It's not like we saw prices come off dramatically. And so I don't think that'll be the case. And then the other thing we've been thinking a lot about is the wealth transfer, which I think we talked about last time I was on your show as well. Just the amount of gifted money in this market and the amount of properties that are owned clear title, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, I'd say part of that, part of that information, like in regards to holding those price points as they are and a certain level of income or whatever that situation is, people make a certain amount of money and they're okay to live in a city that is as desirable and is as expensive as Vancouver, because really for them, the financial constraints are not there for the average individual or average Canadian, as you know, where we saw obviously the impact of that, where the impact actually occurred, where people weren't selling or weren't able to sell, wasn't necessarily on the value of those properties, but that actually trickled into the suburbs and the other areas of BC where we would have seen that transfer historically speaking. Like Adam, as you know, people that are selling their, West Vancouver, East Vancouver, mainland Vancouver, wherever it is, and moving out to, let's say, Coquitlam or even, further out like Langley, any of these other places, that's where the trickle-down effect was really felt, as opposed to Vancouver, because it's such a centralized location. At least that's what I've seen from my perspective.
yeah, with the exception of maybe downtown, because prices have come off downtown, and there's a lot of theories as to why that is. A lot of people feel like the uptick of crime downtown and a variety of kind of outside of the market factors, like people are maybe choosing to live in the collar areas like around downtown. Like if you think about like Kitsilano or Fairview or Mount Pleasant or Grandview Woodlands on the east side, for example, a lot of people are kind of leaving downtown for places that they find are maybe more desirable from a livability perspective, but also have less crime.
Yeah, I could see that being the case. Well, so I guess let's touch on that briefly here, because downtown obviously is primarily condos, and when we think condos, we think about pre-sales and new builds. And obviously, as we know, there's one city in our country that's had a serious issue there, and as it relates to condo values and prices, and that's Toronto. In Toronto, obviously, as you know, pre-sale units and units that are complete have been a serious issue or a serious concern from a value perspective, where they've got hundreds, if not thousands of units that have been built and complete, and people can't sell them or rent them, or they choose not to, and they're not completing on them. Has Vancouver experienced anything similar to that this year in 2024? Have we experienced any issues as it relates to completions impacting the marketplace, not being able to sell assignments in that Vancouver area? Or is that less centralized on Vancouver and more focused on the outside regions based on what you've seen so far?
Yeah, not I would say not to the same level as Toronto, obviously, but I think that there's definitely people that are assigning at significant losses right now for projects that they maybe paid certain prices in anywhere from 2021 kind of range, like peak market conditions. So we're definitely seeing people taking a hit in assignments. We're also seeing people complete on projects that are not worth the same amount in today's market. And then we're also seeing spikes of inventory in areas where there's been lots of completions with new product. So I think it kind of creates an opportunity, but I would say the challenge right now, I think mostly is a lot of our developers in Vancouver, if they don't think the market is right, often what they'll do is just push off their launch. And I mean, I think really what this is indicating to me, and it's unfortunate because we're a market that needs supply, but I don't think we're going to have anywhere near the type of starts that we need in this moment. And I think we're going to see some real challenges, say, around 2028.
Well, you mentioned that you had a developer come on recently onto the podcast, talk about this specifically about holding prices and not building or not developing and what the impact on the marketplace for them would be. I found that quite fascinating or interesting when you talked about price points and not coming off those price points. Like, what was the general feedback or the consensus of I don't know, this is just one person, but of their thoughts on the presale market and what a developer is thinking right now as they're looking at our marketplace?
Well, I think we're in an interesting time. And so, I mean, I guess if I'm a buyer right now and I'm looking at the presale market, I'm thinking there's probably an opportunity at this moment. And Ben Smith from Avesdo. So Avesdo is almost like a point of sales system for developers. So it does a lot of their kind of like almost a CRM. It does a lot of their back end. And what's nice about it is they collect a lot of data about what's going on in the presale market. And he had basically, and I won't go too deep into them, but he had 5 reasons why he thinks it's bottom. And this is what we've been talking about a lot lately, is this idea that like right now, prices are low enough that basically we've bottomed for what developers can actually build this product and sell this product for. So you're looking at like wood frame projects right now between 800 and 1,000 per foot, and concrete projects 1,000 to 1,250 per foot. These are kind of like absolute bottoms on what they can actually deliver built product for. So what happens when people feel like they can't get their prices is that they actually delay launching. And September 2023 marked one of the lowest presale launch rates in the past, in several decades. Projects launched to an astounding 180% from Q2 to Q3 in 2023. And so we're seeing that a lot right now. And this year as well is where we're seeing basically if people can delay launching, they will. And I think what's going to happen this year is all the existing supply that's been launched, that's probably what we're going to have until spring of next year. So there's going to be like a 6-month window where whatever's available right now will be what's an option for a purchaser. The next big push of presale offering will likely come in March or April of next year. So that creates an opportunity for the existing supply. And it means like developer incentives are pretty good today. To move that product, developers are doing lower deposits right now, lower deposit structures. A lot of them are doing credits. There's a variety of incentives, parking stalls or storage lockers. You're seeing that type of thing offered right now to potential buyers. That could go away once the market improves. And a lot of people are anticipating that, because we're in this moment right now where we're anticipating a lot of rate cuts in the next little while. And I mean, you know better than me on the mortgage side, but we've got 4 meetings between now and spring where we could see anywhere from probably, 100 basis points or more potentially. What are your thoughts on that, by the way?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. So I think I do want to touch on that, the presale thing, and then get into the rate piece, because that's obviously pretty impactful. So my first question for you, Adam, is based on what you told me and that podcast episode that you had right there. So September marking one of the lowest times for presale projects to get started. Why, here we are in the end of 2024. Why is a developer even committed to selling right now? Like, why don't some of these guys just hold off on their product or their inventory or put a stop on it or return deposits? Or are we seeing that happen too?
Yeah, we have seen that. We've seen projects we've seen a lot of projects. We've seen like false starts with projects where they think they're going to launch and then they decide basically not to move forward with the offering. We've seen that. We've definitely seen people delaying. So it's like the situation is where we think it's coming this month, and then we find out that it's actually been delayed to next year. So a lot of projects, like if a developer can't meet their requirements, they'll push off as long as they can. And I think we're starting to see that happen right now because the presale market has been a challenging market this year. So,
Wow. Yeah, and I mean, like, obviously, notwithstanding the fact that we've got all these pre-sales that are getting assigned or trying to be assigned by their people, it looks like the market's just like flooded from my perspective. But I've noticed the same on my side. Like any one of my clients right now who's coming to me with a pre-sale, I say the same thing. I'm like, you guys got to negotiate the heck out of this thing, or obviously we hope that you have, or they're just coming with a great negotiation, like a crazy good deposit, like you mentioned, a second parking spot for free, or credits that you wouldn't have seen before. All sorts of discounts. And I think for someone who's looking for that type of thing, it's in an area that you can't buy, or you want brand new, or you can't, maybe not, you can't qualify today. Like they're getting smoking deals compared to what it was even 1 to 2 years ago in this marketplace. But to your point on that pre-sale market, I've noticed the same thing. And just looking at that rate thing, I mean, first and foremost, yes, you're right. We got four potential rate discounts. I mean, obviously, not to get political here, but with the recent change in policy in, south of the border there, everything we talk about right now could be shifted. But the markets as of today are still projecting at least a 1% decline. Not as aggressive it was, 3 months ago, but they're still, looking at a 1% decline in the next 12 months, right? So for many reasons, qualification will be on par. We don't anticipate this to have much of an impact on the fixed rate market, but certainly the general sentiment in the marketplace will be positive, and we'll start to see more people like seeing, the rates themselves start to work their way back up. I think the thing that I'm most curious about more than anything else is just like the demand for product type, right? We talk about, okay, well, there were all these people in 2021, 2022 that were buying pre-sales to flip them. And so what they were doing is they were snatching up, as all the studios and one beds, right? For the most part, right? A whole bunch of studios and one beds. And we'll get into the rental market in a minute here, but for all intents and purposes, it seems like that is the type of product that's been least lowest demand in this type of marketplace right now. And it is the one thing I think that a lot of developers use to fill their buckets and get their, to build up their investment to purchase, no?
Well, yeah. And I mean, I think that's another thing is investing in real estate's almost become a bad word in this province now. And I think a lot of what's been happening is, changes to the Residential Tenancy Act recently, which I'm sure you've talked about a lot on this program. We've talked on ours. It's hard to convince somebody to come to a market right now where you feel like you could find yourself in a really challenging predicament with a tenant, where it's risky if you want to sell your property with a tenant. It's a long leg period if you want to occupy your property at some point. But there's been some changes to the Residential Tenancy Act, whether they were required or not. There have been some changes that have moved the needle in the direction of the tenant, which has left some potential investors concerned about operating in this marketplace. And then I think on top of that, pre-sales, a lot of the financial requirement was based on selling the smaller units to investors. We need investors. And what I think has really been driving the market this year has been end users, people that are moving through the market, right? So I can see why the smaller unit types have not been absorbed the same way they have in the past. And then on top of it, I mean, as we know, like Vancouver is a very tough cash flow market. And when people cannot see the cap gains that they've experienced in the past, or if they don't have the confidence that the cap gain is there, they won't pull the trigger. And I think there's challenges right now. Like right now, I don't think with the economy the way it is, I don't think people are feeling like they have the risk tolerance that they might have had a few years ago. Right. So even when something looks like an opportunity, it's very hard to convince yourself to jump in. That said, we've seen how quickly the market moves, and we've also seen how quickly, confidence changes. Right. And it makes you wonder, like, even this past election, had the Conservative government actually won the election, would that have moved the needle in terms of confidence? If we see another 100 basis point drop in the interest rate, does that move the confidence required to push people back into the market? And that's kind of the TBD, right?
Well, man, you nailed it on so many key points there. And so let's bring this back to our podcast that we did earlier this year. A couple points that you brought up were related to demand, and we just touched on that with regards to pre-sales, obviously saying no, and then the impact of the political decisions, which we're not going to recap the election, but for all intents and purposes, there is an impact on all the decisions, both nationally and provincially, on that marketplace, which leads us into that investment conversation. Because I'll tell you right now, I've had more conversations about investments in the last 60 days than I had the entirety of the year before, or year at all before that. If I could speak, that would be great. So from let's say, August of 2023 to August of 2024, again, minimal decisions. Rates were high. People were scared of the marketplace. They want to see things settle. And when there's a lack of confidence, guess what? People aren't spending their money. And in particular, they're not investing the way they might otherwise do so, especially people that are, more entry level or purchasing one or two investments, as opposed to, let's say, high level, investors with a whole bag of cash. What I've noticed from my perspective is, again, the last 60 days, the conversations are beginning again, right? We're getting people saying, hey, like, I want to buy this single family home, convert it into a 2-part rental or a 3-part rental or whatever that might be. And now this is mostly in cities outside of Vancouver, but I do believe that conversation will eventually start coming back up in Vancouver again as well, because that's obviously just the natural direction of things. As it relates to that demand consideration, and if you're saying that September was the lowest on record, well, there's less pre-sales. Obviously, eventually, at some point in the next few months, we probably see those people who are either completing or finally closing, and then the market will kind of eat that all up. So you'll see that demand start to rear its head around, which is where investors are obviously trying to hop in on this stage right now. Would you agree with that, or what are you seeing out there?
Yeah, and just to kind of clarify, I think the argument is that the existing stock in the pre-sale market is probably what's going to be there for the next 6 months. So we have 6 months to see that inventory get absorbed, and what, it's early days, but it feels like, at least in the resale market, things are starting to shift. And if you talk to people in the pre-sale market, usually what developers or developer sales teams will watch for is the resale market to start showing some activity. And that means typically about 3 months later, you'll start to see pre-sales heat up. So we're seeing activity in the resale market. If that's sustained for the next few months, we'll probably see in 2025 more interest in pre-construction. And at that time, we'll have a bit of a glut of inventory, because it's only been the inventory that exists right now without new launches until spring will be absorbed.
Interesting. And just to understand, what is the purpose or the reason for the 3 months, like that timing?
I think it's just from monitoring the markets over the years and just saying, like, basically, once resale starts to heat up, that's a sign that pre-sale will follow, but typically it's a 3-month lag. And I mean, I don't know how quantifiable that is. It's more so something you'll hear from people that work in the pre-sale industry, is they always monitor what's going on in the resale market.
Got it. Okay, well, with everything that's going on in the pre-sale market and all these properties coming up, and speaking of political decisions, we had a big one last year that took effect this year as it relates to Airbnb properties. And we were talking about this before the show as well, which is the impact on, well, the rental market, like what that's done for not just the rental market, but the short-term market, hotels, you name it, all that. But for the sake of our conversation, how has this impacted supply in the marketplace? Since from May, now we have a 6-month track record. We know what people are doing. What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, well, the rental market is slow. And I mean, I think it could be argued that it's, related to the COVID hangover that has kind of skewed prices in a lot of areas. But we saw kind of peak 1-bedrooms downtown, for example, around $3,000 a month for like a long-term unfurnished rental. And now we see the same type of unit probably generating $2,500 or $2,600. So a pretty substantial drop in rents from the peak. And I think, a lot of people think it has to do, well, with a few things. One is short-term rentals, the risk of short-term rentals from a tax perspective. There's also risks with stratas not allowing or limiting use of your unit for longer term or for durations that are longer than 1 or 3 months. There are still a few Airbnb friendly buildings, but they're not sought after the way that they once were. Obviously, we've seen lots of changes in the city of Vancouver and at the provincial level, kind of basically further restricting short-term rentals, which we've seen a lot of short-term rentals go into the longer-term unfurnished rental market. And then on top of that, when the market has softened, like which it has in the resale market, and people cannot sell their homes or they sit on the market for 3 to 6 months, eventually, if they can't get their price, often what they'll do is they'll put their property back into the rental market or into the rental market for the first time and wait for a brighter spot in the market. So what we've been seeing with our clients is, if they can't sell, if they can't get the price that they want for their property, they will decide or opt to lease it out for a year or a few years and revisit selling at a later date.
Interesting. So you're seeing
we're seeing a spike
like a
of
perfect
inventory.
storm. Like a perfect storm of rental, for a tenant, at least for somebody who's a renter.
Well, yeah, tenants have options now. And I think it's good. Rents were getting very high very quickly in Vancouver. So, in some regard, it's good in the fact that there's more selection for tenants. It doesn't help the creation of inventory, though, in the sense that now our rents are lower. We're trying to entice people to get into the market. Developers have to hit a financing requirement. And they do need investors. So I kind of feel like it's not a great news story for investors in Vancouver and real estate right now. And I'm concerned about what impact that will actually have longer term on the creation of housing. So, and it's all tied together.
If I think about from a perspective of like a renter right now, obviously they're feeling pretty good. What the one thing that I don't know if it's been talked about right now, but like you kind of mentioned it off the bat, which is like BC as an investment market, like has been generally good for a long time for a lot of people, depending on how you look at it. And the thing that I think about it right there is like, we really have such a tenant-friendly tenant-friendly board is set up in the sense that like a tenant can almost do anything and feel like they're invincible. And when you think about the tenancy rules right now and how they're set up to benefit the tenant, what I've actually noticed lately, and this is firsthand, so I don't want to like because definitely there's a lot of great renters. I've got good tenants, so I'm not going to make it sound like it's bad, but I've seen this abuse happen now a few times already, where you're seeing, unfortunately, the bad tenants come out and abuse the heck out of this stuff more frequently right now because they know there's other properties out there and they know that there's better rental values. I was literally just on a call with a real estate agent that I work with out in South Surrey, and he has a condo in Vancouver, and he was just telling me like, I gotta get this guy out right now. We're going through the process of kicking him out right now, but of course, as you know, it takes like 3 months to do that, even though it's better than it used to be. And I said, why, what's going on? Like, he's like, oh, he's just choosing not to pay. He's just like, he knows that there's nothing really we can do, and he's like, well, we're gonna sue the heck out of him if we can, but it's so difficult. So unfortunately, I think we're seeing that more frequently, and thankfully he's not dealing with like damage or any crazy stuff that he knows of yet, although the guy's not out. But it's just that kind of stuff, even though the stories are not very common, I think just continues to turn people off, and they continue to look over at our neighbors to the east and say, well, it's only a 1-hour flight to Alberta. Why don't I start buying, investment properties there? And they're probably right about it too, from that perspective. So that continues to hurt our developers and hurt our rental market. My question is, how long before that continues to work its way into the marketplace and more people say, screw it, we're not getting into this market?
Well, yeah, and time will tell. But I think you're absolutely right. Like, a lot of our investors have shifted to Alberta, and they're doing projects in Alberta, or they're investing in Alberta right now. And I think it's interesting because, whenever the power shifts in the tenant landlord relationship, you see bad actors, and for years we saw bad actors on the landlord side, right? And there's a lot of good people that are landlords, but there's a lot of landlords that were rent evicting and doing a lot of things, right? And now we're seeing more bad actors on the tenancy side because there's not a lot of repercussions for a tenant that doesn't want to leave or doesn't want to pay. So you're absolutely right. And I think what I've been noticing is I've been noticing, first of all, an uptick in tenant landlord disputes, which seems, and this is more anecdotal, but I know that the wait times are very long for arbitration. And I know also that I'm seeing more issues around vacant possession, which never used to be a concern, but tenants just not leaving. So sellers cannot, even if they've done everything right to have a tenant, to serve notice to a tenant, where the tenant still doesn't leave. And we're left with a situation where the buyer can't get vacant possession and the seller can't provide vacant possession. And lately what I've been seeing is really almost like a situation of extortion, where the tenants are requesting buyouts to leave, so that you don't get caught in these very long situations where there has to be, some kind of arbitration or a decision made, because quite frankly, it's creating a lot of problems. I've seen a few just in our brokerage, and it's also causing potential buyers of tenanted properties to pull back and ask if they want to look for something that's owner occupied or vacant. So I think it's actually making it harder to sell your tenanted property as well,
Right.
which is a new consideration.
Yeah, I've seen that as well. And so I almost look at this and say, okay, we've seen this little bit of a dip in the rental rates. And I rented out a property recently, and I had that experience. Like a friend of ours rented out the exact same property literally 3 months before, maybe 2 months before us, at a $4,000 rate, and we received $3,500 for the same type of property, which was like, wow, that's kind of a shock. And it took more time for sure to get. And of course, we were picky on the type of tenant, but still, it was an interesting marketplace from that perspective. And back to your point, it's like, if I'm somebody who's renting in this marketplace, I just have to know that I'm going to deal and face these issues. Doesn't mean that investing in real estate here is a bad thing, but I asked that question. I'm like, hey, are the tenants just kind of doing this themselves? And I know it's unfortunately just a couple bad apples, man. It's just a few bad apples, but there's just this mindset in Vancouver, particularly in BC, where people will just take this approach. And unfortunately, those bad apples are, I think, going to hurt the tenancy. I think they're hurt renters over the course of the next 12 months. And I wouldn't be surprised to see that rebound.
I think there's also, I just, in speaking with landlords, I mean, Vancouver's obviously a great market. Everybody understands the fundamentals. And I think that the fundamentals are still strong. But I think there's been so much layering on of policy, from everything from, the spec tax, empty homes tax, flipping tax, cap gains now at the federal level there, and now the changes to the tenancy rules. It's just like, how many times how many policies can you change that deter investors until it finally gets to the point where people are like, I don't want to operate in this market. And then on top of that, it's the fear of moving the goalpost consistently. And I think that's the thing that I've heard from a lot of people is, lots of our clients over the years, they buy with the idea of one thing, and then the rules change so quickly, or they can't do what they want to do, or which they can't do what their intent was to do with their property, right? And then they feel like, okay, well, depending on who's in power in the province could mean a dramatically different outcome to how I get to use my property, or what I'm charged according, or how I, just basically how real estate operates in this province. So,
I think you hit the nail on the head. You got one side which basically believes that real estate should not be an investment, and it's basically everyone's right, which I'm not here to argue today. And then you got the other side that believes the opposite, which is what it's been in our country for the better part of the last 100 years, from my understanding or interpretation. And it seems like both sides are going to basically butt heads, and I'm not sure what the outcome is. But as you said, I think at the end of the day, the party that's going to get negatively impacted the most is the potential home owner, because we're going to see less and less product built as developers can wait 10 years. They can wait 5 years before they put, shovels in the ground, right? And they're not going to build if there's no profit in it. They'll just hold. And then 5-10 years from now, the property's going to be worth more, right?
People don't understand how much risk there is in the development industry, and how tight the margins are to make sense of it. I think that's one of the biggest challenges is when when these are smart business people, and if the profit's not there, they're not going to do it, and not going to take on the risk if they don't have to, right? So, and we see that time and time again. We see moments where people pull back, and we don't get the inventory that we need to be built, and it's a vicious cycle. And then we see these demand spikes where we see a whole bunch of buyers trying to buy the same properties. And
oh, sorry, I cut you off there.
No, I was just going to say, if you look at the past, I don't know. I mean, I've been selling real estate for almost 15 years, and been very few markets that I've operated in where we haven't been in multiples on almost everything. Like, for 15 years, there's been these demand shocks, right? And then we have these moments where there's soft moments like we're in now. And then in the soft moments, a lot of people don't create the inventory that is created in the demand shock moments or the busy moments. And then we are in a bad situation down the road. And it's hard to imagine that we won't be in that situation in 2028.
Yeah, just generally speaking, winter of 2024 And with obviously, as you mentioned, pre-sales being the great opportunity, in your mind, any other predictions that you see for the next 3 to 4 months before the spring market hits? You're
Yeah.
okay with that?
And I think, and I want to clarify, because I think that pre-sales are the best opportunity in the market right now. I think there's better buying opportunities, but I would say that if you are looking at pre-sale and you are a pre-sale buyer, I feel like right now is a good opportunity for you, and you should look at what developers are offering and try and carve out a deal. But if you are someone that's open to the resale market, there are probably even better investment strategies that you can employ in a market like this. So I just want to clarify that. But I do think that there will be some pre-sale opportunities over the next few months. There's some really great opportunities in assignments as well. I'm seeing some really, really great deals in assignments. I'm sure you are too. So people that have bought a contract, an exclusive right to a unit, but have not completed on it yet and are now selling their contract to a unit. So lots of opportunities there being sold. And yeah, in terms of next year, I think your question was about 2025 or the balance of this year.
Yeah, I would just say before the quote unquote spring market hits and rates go down the 50 to 75 basis points, like, what do you think? Like, is there going to be much movement, or is it going to be a stalemate until that time?
I think in the resale market, I think we're going to see one more push of activity before the end of the year. I don't think it's going to be overwhelming, but I think it's going to be an uptick from where we were at this time last year. So a little bit of life in the market, and it will be people that are thinking that we're going to see some rate cuts and more activity in 2025. So they're thinking that they want to jump in now. At least anecdotally, that's the type of conversations I've been having with people, and that's what I've been hearing and hearing from colleagues as well. And then I think 2025 is one of those. I don't think, there's a lot of people out there saying, "Oh, 2025 is going to be a huge year," and I'm a little bit more reserved. I think we're going to be a busier year in 2025. I think we're going to see a relatively busy spring, but I think it's more of kind of a more balanced, favoring seller type spring. I don't think it's going to be, the markets that we've been used to in previous years, where everything's a seller's market and everything's multiple offers. But I think that we will see even right now, I'm seeing multiples still out there, and depending on what you're trying to buy. And I think that's the more useful way to think about it, is that, we get people calling and saying, "Hey, we heard that there's deals in the market." And it's like, well, where are you shopping? What price band are you shopping? Because there's still markets that are very tight, with not a lot of inventory being built, or not enough inventory for the amount of demand. I'm helping someone right now with duplexes on the east side, for example. There's not a lot of them. So when one comes up, there's a lot of activity. There's a lot of demand for that type of market. Or like we talked about earlier, kits has been insanely resilient, where, so if you're looking in kits, you might not be able to carve out an amazing deal. But if you're looking in other areas, then yeah, there's a lot of inventory. So
what I'm hearing from you is the same thing that we try to tell everyone. Number one is that there are micro markets everywhere. Don't take what's happening on one side of the city as a general rule of thumb. Don't take a pre-sale condo as the same thing that's happening in a resale detached house, particularly in different cities, and make sure that you're obviously talking to somebody who understands that particular marketplace. The second thing I'm hearing is the same thing that I'm hearing every single day right now, which is that people who are actively getting into the marketplace or reaching out to getting pre-approved are saying virtually the same thing. Like, I see rates coming down. I want to get in right now. There's still lots of opportunities, and I want to be able to negotiate. I'm actually seeing that every person that reaches out to me is literally saying that almost word for word at this point right now.
Yeah.
And I'm not surprised to hear that that's kind of the take that you have in the marketplace right now. I'm one thing I would point out, and I think that you probably have told people this the same thing, because you mentioned it in your comments right there, is that if you're looking for that new property, because we know that your folks are looking for new homes, whether at location, just want something brand new, something stylish, whatever, that sort of thing, is that, like, don't sleep on talking to your realtor, especially if they do a fair amount of business, looking for assignment deals, right? Because there's assignments floating around and they can't be marketed. Like, you can't put them on the marketplace. They can only go behind the scenes, and there are people selling them, maybe not like way below value per se, but like they're selling them for what would be considered to be a great value right now for a project that might be very difficult to get into, and it's brand new. You can get into it right away today, right? So those are some opportunities that I've seen that nobody talks about.
Yeah, or I would also add to that and say there are opportunities in buildings that have recently completed where there's a lot of inventory in a particular building. So
Right.
townhouse developments where there's, 8 to 10 townhomes that are the same floor plan, all listed right now, or condo buildings where, there's 30 units available. And it's kind of like, it gives you an opportunity to find out who's truly motivated in the building. So I think it's one of these things though, like every market, it's the skins of the onion, right? Like you have to kind of figure out exactly, it's the micro markets is exactly it, right? I mean, you can't make generalizations about Vancouver because the blue chip areas continue to be blue chip. And then there's these pockets of opportunity. And if you don't know how to navigate it, you might be spinning your tires.
Yep. If you don't know how to navigate it, then Adam can help you out with that, right, buddy? So thank you very much, man. I appreciate you coming on, surviving the whole 45 minutes here with me today. I know it was a fun weekend up in Whistler, so everybody can guess at what kind of crazy stuff you went up to. You were drinking water and sledding, right? That was it.
Well, I have 2 kids under 5, so it wasn't crazy by most people's standards. So
you weren't spending all weekend at Garfunkel's. All right, fair enough. I think it's called Garf's, the short version. Anyway, not a local, so they can forgive me. Appreciate you coming on, man. Thank you so much. And if you haven't already had a chance to do so, definitely check out Adam's podcast. He does with his brother Matt. The Vancouver Real Estate Podcast always has fantastic guests, and they're hyper-focused on the Vancouver region. Appreciate you, Adam. Thanks for coming on, buddy.
Yeah, thanks, Alex.
That was an unreal episode of The Flow. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did on my side right here. If you haven't already done so, make sure to check out all of the incredible resources that we have available. You can find us on Instagram at Flow Mortgage Co. You can find us on our website, getflowmortgage.ca. And of course, don't forget our free first-time homebuyer masterclass that's currently available on our website for anyone who listens to the episodes. And if you loved what you listened here today, the only thing that we ask for is to share this with someone else that you think this could help. And hey, maybe leave us a great review online.